Welcome to Lento English. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
1. Introduction. It is the beginning of October in the United States. In the capital city, Washington, D.C., the political feeling is very tense. There is a big problem that needs a solution very soon. The government needs a plan for its money for the new year. This plan is a law called a spending bill. The leaders in Congress, the place where laws are made, must agree on this bill. If they do not agree, the government cannot legally spend money. This is a very serious situation. The two main political groups, the Democrats and the Republicans, are in a big disagreement. They cannot find a solution that they both like, and time is running out. The main disagreement is about health care. There is an important health care program that helps millions of people in the country. This program helps them pay for doctors, hospital visits, and medicine. The Democrats want to make sure there is enough money for this program to continue helping people. They believe it is very important to protect this help. They want to add more money for this program into the new spending bill. For them, this is the most important part of the new plan. They will not agree to a bill without this extra money. The Republicans have a different idea about the spending bill. They do not want to add extra money for the health care program right now. They think it is better to pass a simple, temporary spending bill first. This kind of bill would keep government spending at the same level as before for a short time. It would not include any big changes. They believe this is the best way to avoid problems and keep the government working. They feel the Democrats are asking for too much at the last minute and are not willing to talk about other options. The government has a very important deadline. A new spending bill must be ready by midnight on the 1st of October. If there is no bill, the government will have a shutdown. A shutdown means many government offices and services must close their doors. This affects many people and many parts of the country. The time is running out very fast. There are only a few hours left before the midnight deadline. The leaders from both sides are talking in meetings, but they are not close to an agreement. The situation is getting more serious with every minute. All across the country, people are watching the news. They are waiting to see what their leaders in Washington, D.C. will do. Many people are worried about what a shutdown will mean for their daily lives. They worry about their jobs and their communities. Will the national parks and museums close? Will government workers get paid for their work? These are the questions on everyone's mind. The political disagreement in the Capitol is now a national concern. The country watches as the clock ticks closer to midnight. 2. The two sides. In Congress, the two main political groups, the Democrats and the Republicans, could not agree. They had very different ideas about the new spending bill. This disagreement was at the center of the growing crisis. The Democrats' main goal was to protect a health care program. This program, the Affordable Care Act, helped millions of people buy health insurance. It did this by giving them money called subsidies. These subsidies made insurance much cheaper. Democrats said that without this help, many families would not be able to go to a doctor when they were sick. They wanted to extend these subsidies and would not support a bill that did not include them. They felt it was their duty to protect this important program for the American people. The Republicans, on the other hand, wanted a different solution. They pushed for a simple, temporary spending bill. This type of bill would keep the government funded at its current levels for a short period. It would not include any new or extra spending. They argued this would give both sides more time to negotiate a larger, long-term deal without the immediate pressure of a shutdown. They believed adding the health care subsidies made the bill too complicated and was not the right way to make such a big decision. As the two sides argued, the president's administration added a new, serious threat. They connected the possible shutdown to mass layoffs of federal workers. This was a shocking idea. The administration warned that if a deal was not made, many government employees could lose their jobs permanently. This tactic was very unusual and changed the conversation. In past shutdowns, workers were furloughed. A furlough is temporary. Employees are sent home without pay, but they always have a job to return to when the government reopens. This time was different. The President's Office of Management and Budget sent a memo to all government agencies. The memo instructed them to prepare reduction in force notices. This was the official term for permanent layoffs. These notices were for employees in programs that were not a priority for the president. This was a powerful move. It was a direct message to the Democrats. It suggested that their fight for health care funding could cost thousands of people their jobs. The threat of permanent job losses added a new level of pressure to the talks. The problem was no longer just about political ideas. It was now a real threat to the lives of many government workers and their families. 3. The clock ticks. It was the last day. The sun came up on a very worried country. In just a few hours, the government could run out of money. Everyone watched the news and waited. The big question was simple: would the politicians make a deal? The deadline was midnight. The clock was ticking and time was running out. In Washington, the feeling was very tense. The leaders of the government knew they had to do something, but they did not agree on what to do. The whole country felt the pressure of this final day. Leaders from the two political parties started their meetings early in the morning. They met in important rooms in the Capitol building. They talked for hours and hours. Democrats said they needed more money for health care. They wanted to help people pay for their insurance. Republicans did not agree. They wanted to pass a simple bill to keep the government open for a short time. They did not want to add any extra spending. The talks were difficult. Each side wanted to win. No one wanted to compromise. They argued about the same points again and again. By the afternoon, it was clear they were not close to a solution. The doors to the meeting rooms stayed closed, but everyone knew the news was not good. As the evening came, people across the nation felt more and more anxious. Government workers wondered if they would have a job tomorrow. Their families worried about paying their bills without a paycheck. On television, news reporters talked about what a shutdown would mean. They said some government services would stop. People would not be able to visit national parks. Some offices would close. The country had faced shutdowns before, but this one felt different. The president's administration was new and powerful. People were afraid of what might happen. The feeling of uncertainty was everywhere. The final hours felt very long. The politicians stopped their meetings. There was no more talking. It seemed that no deal was possible. In offices and homes, people watched the clock on their screens. 10 o'clock came, then 11 o'clock. The minutes passed slowly. The country was quiet, waiting for the final moment. Then it happened. The clock showed midnight. On October 1st, the old government funding was gone. There was no new funding to take its place. The United States federal government was officially in a partial shutdown. The fight was over for the day, but a new, bigger problem had just begun. The first days. The first morning of the shutdown was quiet and strange. Across the country, many government offices were closed and dark. The political problems in Washington were now real problems for many people. The effects started immediately, and everyone could see the changes. It was the beginning of a difficult and uncertain time for the nation. The government was not operating in its normal way, and nobody knew how long this situation would last. The first day turned into the second, and then the third, with no solution in sight. Many federal employees woke up with no job to go to. These workers were called non-essential. This meant their jobs were not considered necessary for immediate public safety or national security. They were furloughed. To be furloughed means you are sent home from your job and you do not get paid. Hundreds of thousands of people were suddenly without work and without an income. They worried about their families and how they would pay for rent and food. They did not do anything wrong, but because the politicians could not agree, they lost their paychecks. It was a very stressful and unfair situation for them. The shutdown also affected public places that many people enjoy. All national parks closed their doors to visitors. Big gates and signs blocked the entrances to famous parks across the country. Families who planned vacations had to cancel their trips, losing money and their holiday time. Museums in the capital city also closed. Tourists were very disappointed because they could not see the historical things they traveled far to visit. These closures showed that the shutdown was not just a problem for government workers. It was a problem for small businesses near the parks and for everyone who used public services. However, some parts of the government had to keep working. These were the essential services. These are the jobs that are too important to stop, even for one day. For example, people who protect the country's borders continued to work. Air traffic controllers stayed in their towers to keep airplanes safe in the sky. The mail was still delivered to people's homes and businesses. These services were necessary to keep the country safe and functioning. The government could not stop these important jobs, even during a partial shutdown. But there was a big problem for these essential workers. They had to go to work every day, but they were not getting paid. They worked without knowing when their next paycheck would arrive. This was very difficult and created a lot of worry. They had to buy food and pay for their homes just like everyone else. In past shutdowns, workers usually received their money after the government opened again. This was called back pay. But during the first days of this shutdown, there was no guarantee. They had to work for free and hope for the best. 5. A new kind of shutdown. The shutdown continued, but then the situation became more serious. The President's Office of Management and Budget, also called the OMB, sent a new message to all government agencies. This was not a normal message. It was a memo that changed everything for many federal workers. The memo told agency leaders to prepare for something new. It said they should get ready to send out special notices to some employees. These were called reduction in force notices. This was a formal name for permanent layoffs. It meant that some people could lose their jobs completely. This was very different from a furlough. In a furlough, workers were sent home without pay, but they usually got their jobs back when the shutdown ended. They also received back pay for the time they missed. A layoff was not temporary. It was permanent. The memo was specific about who might get these notices. It said the layoffs should be considered for workers in programs that were not consistent with the president's priorities. This created a lot of fear. If a worker was in an agency or a program that the administration did not support, their job was now at risk. For example, the administration wanted to make agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency smaller. Workers there felt very unsafe. This new action changed the feeling of the shutdown. Before, it was a difficult time, but people believed it would end. Now, for the first time in a modern shutdown, there was a real threat of mass firings. This gave the president's office more power. They could decide which parts of the government to weaken by firing their workers. Some experts said this was a tactic to pressure the other political party. The message was clear. If a deal was not made, the government could be changed forever. Other experts were not sure if these layoffs were legal. They said there were rules that must be followed, like giving a 60-day written notice. But the memo from the OMB made one thing certain. This was a new kind of shutdown, and the rules were different this time. 6. People are affected. The government shutdown was not just a political problem in the capital. Its effects started to spread across the country. More and more people began to feel the impact in their daily lives. The problem was getting bigger, and it was touching families, small businesses, and the national economy. For many, the shutdown was now a personal crisis and a time of great worry. The decisions made by politicians were now causing real problems for regular citizens. The biggest and most direct problem was for the federal workers. Hundreds of thousands of people were not receiving their paychecks. This created a lot of financial hardship. These workers had bills to pay, like rent for their homes and food for their families. Without their regular income, it was very difficult to manage these costs. The new threat of permanent layoffs made everything worse. Workers were not just missing pay, they were worried they might lose their jobs completely. This uncertainty caused a great deal of stress for many families who did not know what the future would bring. Small businesses also began to suffer. Many businesses depend on government workers for their income. Restaurants and coffee shops near federal buildings were suddenly very quiet. With no workers coming to the office, these businesses lost many customers. The problem was also serious for towns near national parks. When the parks closed, tourists stopped visiting. This meant that hotels, gift shops, and tour companies lost a lot of money. These small business owners did not do anything wrong, but the shutdown was hurting them badly. They worried about how they would pay their own employees and bills. The shutdown also affected the country's whole economy. When so many people stop getting paid, they also stop spending money. They do not buy new clothes, go to restaurants, or purchase big things like cars. This slowdown in spending is not good for the economy. The government itself also stopped a lot of its spending on projects and services. This cut in spending from both people and the government made the economy weaker. The longer the shutdown continued, the more damage it caused to the country's financial health. The effects were becoming serious for everyone, not just for government employees. 7. The political fight. As the shutdown continued, more people became angry. They saw on the news that government workers were not getting paid. They saw that national parks were closed. People wanted the politicians in Washington to do something. They called their representatives and sent messages. They asked them to work together and end the shutdown. The pressure on the lawmakers grew every day. Everyone knew that the situation needed to change soon. The country was watching and waiting for a solution. The public wanted the government to work again. The Democrats spoke to the public about the problems. They talked about the federal workers who had no money to pay for food or their homes. They shared stories of families who were struggling. They also pointed out that important services were stopped. This was a big problem for many people across the country. The Democrats said it was important to help people with their health care. They did not want to stop the programs that gave people affordable health insurance. They said the other side was not thinking about the real people who were affected by these political arguments. The Republicans had a different view. They said the government was spending too much money. They argued that the Democrats wanted to add new spending to the bill. They believed this was not the right time for that. They wanted a simple bill to open the government again without the extra spending. They blamed the Democrats for the shutdown. They said the Democrats were refusing to agree to a fair plan. The Republicans told their supporters that they were fighting against wasteful government spending. They said they were trying to be responsible with the country's money. The president's administration had its own plan. They used the shutdown as a chance to make big changes. The administration wanted to make some parts of the government smaller. They wanted to cut funding for certain agencies. Two of these agencies were the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Education. The president had promised to make these departments smaller. Now, the shutdown gave him an opportunity to do it. This was not just about temporary funding. For the administration, it was a fight about the size and role of the government itself. This made finding an agreement even more difficult. 8. A deal is made. After many long weeks, the government shutdown was causing serious problems across the country. The economic effects were getting worse every day. Small businesses that depended on government workers or tourism lost a lot of money. The families of federal employees struggled to pay for food and their homes without regular paychecks. People everywhere became angry and frustrated. They called and wrote to their leaders in Congress. They demanded that the politicians stop fighting and find a solution. The public pressure grew very strong, and the leaders in Washington knew they could not ignore it any longer. The country needed the government to work again. Because of the economic problems and the public's anger, the leaders from both parties finally agreed to meet. They returned to the negotiating table to talk about a deal. The meetings were difficult and lasted for many hours, sometimes late into the night. For a long time, it seemed like they would not agree on anything. Each side still wanted different things for the country. One party wanted more funding for healthcare programs, while the other party wanted to keep spending at the same level. But this time was different. They saw the news stories about people suffering, and they knew they had to find a compromise. At last, they reached an agreement. It was not a perfect deal for either side, but it was enough to end the shutdown. The compromise provided temporary money to fund the government for the next few months. This gave them more time to work on a long-term plan. The deal also included some extra money for the health care subsidies that the Democrats wanted. It was a solution that allowed both sides to feel like they had won something important. The president quickly signed the new bill into law. The government was officially open again. Federal workers received the news and prepared to go back to their jobs. They were told they would receive back pay for all the weeks they were sent home. This was a great relief for many families who needed the money. However, most workers did not feel happy. Their morale was very low. They felt that the politicians had used them as tools in a political fight. The threat of permanent layoffs or being fired was a new and scary idea. It made people feel that their jobs were not safe. Even with the shutdown over, that fear and worry remained. This shutdown taught the nation an important lesson. It showed everyone how political disagreements can directly hurt the lives of normal citizens. It was not just about politics or money, it was about people's futures. The government's aggressive tactics changed how people saw shutdowns. They were not just a temporary pause anymore. They could become a way to fire employees and change how the government works. The experience left many people worried about what would happen the next time the country's leaders could not agree.